Back in 1963, a single manufacturing plant located in Chicago held a 25% monopoly on all bicycles purchased across the United States. If you peeked inside any typical family carport stretching from Connecticut all the way to California, you had a 1 in 4 probability of spotting that iconic brand engraved right into the shiny metal handlebars Schwinn. This brand manufactured the legendary Stingray, a model that essentially shaped the youth of millions. Furthermore, they conceptualized the Fat Tire Cruiser, the classic newsboy ride, and that aggressive-looking chopper featuring a long banana saddle that absolutely every child nationwide pleaded with their folks to get them. During its absolute zenith, this corporation operated around the clock, running 3 continuous shifts, 24 hours a day, employing 1,800 individuals within a massive Chicago manufacturing hub while moving past 1 million units annually. These two-wheelers were so highly sought after that retailers maintained back orders stretching out for 6 months. However, a disastrous turn of events occurred. Fast forward to 1983, and those exact same Midwestern production lines were completely abandoned. The entire workforce had vanished. The once roaring equipment made not a single sound. Just 8 years later, this resilient business, which had successfully weathered both the Great Depression and a pair of global conflicts, officially declared insolvency. Their industry dominance plummeted from 25% down to a mere 5%, leaving them suffocating under $82 million in financial liabilities. What follows is the historical account of how a single transplant from Germany transformed a surging cycling trend into the most dominant bicycle dynasty the United States had ever seen. It illustrates how cutting-edge engineering and premium craftsmanship forged a corporate powerhouse that appeared completely unstoppable. Yet it also reveals how this very same empire executed a string of choices so incredibly hubristic and nearsighted that the whole operation collapsed upon itself in under 20 years. We are not simply talking about vintage 10-speeds decaying away down in your folks' cellar. This narrative serves as a warning about the lethal price of resisting evolution. It highlights the sheer peril of assuming brand recognition alone guarantees survival. It ultimately asks what occurs when a lineage becomes so obsessed with past triumphs that they completely miss the massive shifts coming toward them. Step right into the quieted halls of the Schwinn plant, the very place where the nation's ultimate cycling fantasy was constructed, ruled supreme, and eventually demolished. Chapter 1. The Foreign-Born Visionary, Hardheim, Germany, 1871. An 11-year-old kid by the name of Ignaz Schwinn attends his dad's burial observing the wooden box being dropped into the icy earth. His mom simply lacks the financial means to raise him anymore. A few short weeks later, he is sent away to a technical academy, exactly the sort of institution where impoverished youth are taught manual labor skills just to keep food in their bellies. While the rest of the neighborhood kids are out having fun, Ignaz is busy mastering machining tools, mechanical cogs, and highly exact metallurgy. The experience is incredibly harsh and isolating, yet it ultimately proves to be his salvation. Reaching the age of 16, he secures an apprenticeship with a mobile bike mechanic, journeying between German municipalities armed with nothing but a toolkit and a sleeping mat. Meanwhile, cycling is experiencing massive continent-wide growth throughout Europe. Representing the absolute cutting edge of transit innovation, this movement completely captivates Ignaz's mind. Rather than merely repairing broken parts, he analyzes the machinery, deeply disassembling components and drafting upgrades inside journals he keeps on his person at all times. He isn't merely picking up a profession, he is figuring out the blueprints to construct an absolute juggernaut. Upon turning 20, he scores a position over at Heinrich Kleier's Frankfurt-based cycle facility, easily among the most sophisticated production centers in the entire nation. However, Ignaz refuses to settle for being a basic assembly line employee. He pays close attention. He absorbs knowledge. He constantly strives for more, and in a matter of years, management bumps him up to product drafter, followed quickly by a supervisory role. Fast forward to 1889, and Kleier has enough faith in him to let him co-develop a brand new production campus, a site that would later transform into the renowned Adler Works, essentially one of the most massive manufacturing hubs across Europe. At just 29 years of age, Ignaz Schwinn has already played a key role in raising a highly complex, state-of-the-art industrial property on the European mainland. Any normal person would feel fulfilled at this point. Yet he remains hungry, spotting a trend that completely bypasses his peers. Germany is incredibly congested, and the local cycling sector is entirely tapped out. With roughly 3 different builders battling for identical buyers in every single municipality, expansion opportunities are non-existent, leaving absolutely zero chance for true supremacy. Conversely, over on the other side of the Atlantic, the United States represents an untapped frontier. Thus, in 1891, as a 31-year-old man, Ignaz commits to a move that alters the course of history. Securing a ticket aboard a steam-powered vessel, he makes the transatlantic voyage with barely a dime to his name, eventually disembarking right into Chicago, a metropolis booming with chaotic energy, relentless drive, and raw manufacturing power. His grasp of the local language is heavily flawed. He lacks a professional network entirely. He possesses practically no cash. What he does bring to the table is 10 solid years of expertise crafting elite-tier bicycles, combined with an unwavering conviction that he is meant to do much more than punch a clock for another boss. The industrial scene in Chicago during the 1890s is practically a lawless frontier. Driven by a massive cultural obsession cycle, brands are sprouting up virtually everywhere you look. Demand is off the charts. Consumers are purchasing them left and right. It resembles an economic boom town, and Ignaz has essentially just shown up holding the heaviest shovel. He secures his initial gig acting as a plant overseer at Fowler Cycle Manufacturing Company. It offers fair compensation and a respectable title, yet it still falls short of his ambitions. Before a full 12 months pass, he leaps over to International Manufacturing Company, taking charge of their entire engineering department. He earns a heftier salary and handles greater duties, yet he remains unsatisfied. Night after night, Ignaz returns to his tiny flat, gazing upward while crunching the financial figures in his head. He realizes he is just lining the pockets of other executives. They are pocketing the revenue generated by his personal creations and technical breakthroughs. Now 33 years of age, he ranks among the premier cycle developers in Chicago and potentially the entire country, yet he is still ultimately just on the payroll. He continues answering to superiors. He is dedicating his sweat to someone else's vision rather than focusing on his own empire. But all of that is about to change. Chapter 2. Forging a Dynasty, 1894. Ignaz Schwinn steps into a sit-down that is about to alter his destiny forever. Seated opposite him is Adolf Frederick William Arnold, an incredibly affluent German-American entrepreneur, the mastermind behind the Arnold brothers' meatpacking dynasty and the head of Haymarket Produce Bank. The dynamic is simple. Arnold holds the purse strings and Ignaz brings the sheer talent. Arnold has his finger on the pulse of the nation. Two-wheelers have completely taken over the streets, and this massive craze is only in its infancy. The tycoon requires a true expert to actually manufacture the goods. Meanwhile, Ignaz requires serious funding so he can quit punching a clock for someone else. They strike an agreement in record time. By 1895, Arnold Schwinn and Company officially launches in the Windy City. It is a highly straightforward arrangement. The banker funds the venture while the engineer manages the factory floor. Zero boardroom bureaucracy, zero micromanagement. The young immigrant has ultimately secured the exact prize he had been hunting for ever since arriving in the States. Total autonomy. As for their initial play, they lack a brand identity right out of the gate. Consequently, they decide to host a naming competition for their retail partners. Coincidentally, 4 separate vendors pitch the exact same idea world. The title hits the nail on the head. It is audacious, visionary, and globally understood. World Bicycles debuts to the public featuring cutting-edge equipment that Ignaz handpicked, combining his foundational European training with his newly sharpened urban expertise. The superior craftsmanship is instantly noticeable to anyone paying attention. You are not looking at flimsy replicas hastily assembled in some dingy cellar. Instead, these are highly tuned contraptions forged by an expert possessing a deep grasp of metalwork angles and structural integrity. Plus, the launch window is absolutely flawless. The entire country has gone completely crazy for cycling. Just within the Chicago city limits, upwards of 300 distinct factories are churning these rides out at breakneck speeds. It is a total madhouse. We are talking about a massive gold rush. Retail outlets are springing up on every single block, while venture capital is absolutely pouring into the sector. Every guy on the street believes he is destined for wealth. The reality is the vast majority are horribly mistaken. Ignaz fully realizes that this specific market is a ticking time bomb. The secret to outlasting a boom is not panning for nuggets. It is peddling the pickaxes. But that only works if your tools are built to last. Even as rival firms slash their standards just to maximize output, Ignaz remains fiercely fixated on the minute elements. He zeroes in on impeccable joints, logical structural design, and hardware that refuses to break down after a mere 6 months of riding. His endgame is not dominating the current season. He plans to conquer the upcoming 20 years. Revenue skyrockets and the brand's prestige solidifies. Fast forward to 1899, and the partnership is flourishing so immensely that they prepare for a massive expansion. They buy out the March Davis Bicycle Company and erect a brand new manufacturing hub, one that is substantially larger, significantly leaner, and far more mechanized than their previous setups. Ignaz is aggressively growing his footprint right as his peers are barely treading water. Yet a fascinating twist is waiting just around the corner. A colossal corporate syndicate known as the American Bicycle Company reaches out with a business proposition. They operate as a cartel, executing a hostile takeover strategy by acquiring any bike maker in sight to completely monopolize the trade. Naturally, they set their sights on Arnold Schwinn and Company. The pitch is incredibly lucrative. We are talking massive liquid funds paid immediately, paired with locked-in deals. Naturally, countless other founders are eagerly signing on the dotted line. Ignaz flatly rejects it, and his financial backer stands firmly by that decision. Refusing the deal takes serious nerve, considering the sheer scale of this syndicate. By saying no, they are declaring war on an unstoppable behemoth that is currently devouring the industry. Still, the German engineer smells a rat. He has witnessed this exact scenario play out in the past. The financials simply make zero sense, and the syndicate's aggressive moves reek of sheer panic rather than calculated genius. To him, the entire enterprise looks incredibly fragile. He prefers gambling on his own abilities. Exactly 3 years down the line in 1903, that very same cartel utterly implodes financially. Every single brand that's sold out to the conglomerate sinks straight to the bottom alongside it. Equipment is auctioned off, assembly lines go quiet, and laborers are thrown out on the street. Meanwhile, Arnold and Schwinn remain upright, fiercely autonomous, and entirely in the black. The mastermind successfully sidestepped a lethal trap that wiped out scores of his rivals. However, merely outlasting the cartel does not guarantee prosperity, especially when the consumer landscape is radically transforming without warning. Following 1900 retail numbers for pedal bikes plunge 25% across the country. The explanation for this decline is painfully straightforward. Motor vehicles and motorized bikes arrive on the scene. Suddenly, the automobile transitions from an elite hobbyist's gadget into a genuinely practical way to commute. Meanwhile, motorbikes offer more speed, noise, and sheer thrill than any standard pedal bike ever possibly could. The golden era has officially ended, and reality has come crashing down. The celebration is officially over. Throughout the following several years, countless two-wheel manufacturers go belly up, leading to widespread plant closures. Massive industrial districts are completely abandoned. Employees find themselves jobless by the thousands. The lucrative era has officially dried up, leaving behind an incredibly painful aftermath. The once bustling cycling hub of the Windy City resembles an absolute ghost town. However, Ignaz refuses to hit the panic button. He is simply observing, doing the math, and biding his time. Having already weathered a financial depression back in his homeland, he anticipates the upcoming phases flawlessly. The fragile enterprises fold immediately, with the frantic ones not far behind. Once the chaos inevitably clears, the remaining players do far more than just exist. They absolutely rule the marketplace, thanks to the sheer lack of rivalry, enhanced brand authority, and massive expansion potential. After all, Ignaz Schwinn did not cross the Atlantic merely to blend in with 300 other operators. He relocated to become the undisputed champion long after the rest threw in the towel. Chapter 3. Weathering the Storm. 1905. The great cycling crash is finalized. Just half a decade prior, the city boasted 300 distinct builders. Today, a mere 12 remain. That is the whole list. A dozen victors standing among 300 casualties. Ignaz Schwinn belongs to that exact group. He isn't merely staying afloat, he is actively prowling for opportunities. While rival companies sell off their holdings and put their gear on the auction block, this man is scooping everything up. He starts snatching up failed production plans for a fraction of their actual value, gutting them to claim their top-tier gear, their exclusive designs, and their specialized instruments. Essentially, he is pulling the production power of an entire sector straight into his own personal enterprise. You cannot just call this sheer luck. This is pure calculated planning. Before the 10-year mark hits, Schwinn constructs a state-of-the-art large-scale manufacturing plant that rivals anything else in the United States. Later in 1908, Ignaz executes his gutsiest play so far. He purchases Adolf Arnold's entire stake in the business. Every last piece of equity becomes his. Following 13 years of working together, the man finally has total control. Gone are the days of divided choices and finding middle ground. The corporation, the dream and the dynasty belong entirely to him, and he plans to push it toward an avenue that takes absolutely everyone by surprise. Two-wheelers have not completely faded away yet. Their popularity has severely stalled. The grown-up demographic has basically collapsed. The single consumer base that actually keeps moving forward is the youth. Mothers and fathers continue getting bikes for their young ones, though that customer base has its limits. Our founder requires a new revenue stream, which he ultimately discovers in motorized bikes. The reasoning makes complete sense. Motorbikes require comparable assembly techniques, rely on matching metalwork, and follow practically identical mechanical foundations. His current crew is already incredibly skilled at putting together chassis, tires, and transmission systems. Branching out feels like the obvious next step. During 1912, the visionary takes over Excelsior Motor Manufacturing and Supply Company, a modest yet highly regarded motorized bike creator. 5 years down the line in 1917, he purchases Henderson Motorcycle, blending both businesses together to form Excelsior Henderson. This motorized branch absolutely skyrockets. Excelsior Henderson machines prove to be incredibly swift, exceptionally dependable, and wonderfully put together. All the knowledge he picked up while crafting regular bikes transfers perfectly into the world of motors and velocity. Approaching the dawn of the 1920s, Excelsior Henderson ranks as the third biggest motorbike producer across the nation, sitting right behind Indian and Harley-Davidson. The tycoon currently oversees a pair of massive operations at the exact same time, with each venture generating serious piles of cash. Yet there is a detail that folks often overlook. Even though the motor-driven sector looks incredibly cool and thrilling, the pedal-powered side remains his absolute bedrock. Then arriving in 1914, that core bedrock turns into an absolute powerhouse. Schwinn stands as the most massive bike maker on the globe, dominating more than 25% of the whole national sector. A quarter of all two-wheelers purchased across the United States proudly display his brand. The man did not merely weather the economic crash, he completely mastered it. Rival firms either ran out of cash or were swallowed up by bigger fish. The industry tightened up precisely how he had guessed, leaving Schwinn standing victorious at the peak. Grown-up cycles have pretty much vanished, having been swapped out for automobiles. However, the youth demographic belongs entirely to him. Families put absolute faith in the Schwinn brand. They understand it stands for excellent craftsmanship, ruggedness, and security. Getting a Schwinn means you are buying far more than a simple plaything. You are putting money into something that holds up for ages, gets handed off to little brothers or sisters, and withstands the serious punishment that only youths know how to dish out. The innovator constructed a label that truly carries weight. Back in the early 20th century United States, that kind of reputation holds more value than pure cash. Following the end of World War I, a truly significant shift takes place. The founder's boy, Frank W. Schwinn, officially steps into the family business. Frank spent his childhood observing his dad construct a massive dynasty from scratch. The son grasps the industry, honors the workmanship, and holds the exact same fierce dedication to top-tier standards. We are not talking about a privileged, entitled youth sliding into an effortless management gig. The younger man spent his whole existence gearing up for this moment. He practically lived on the production lines, he buddies up with the distributors, and he genuinely understands the buyers. The patriarch is currently pushing through his late 50s. Though still incredibly witty and highly motivated, his mind has shifted toward the distant future. He is focusing heavily on what he will leave behind. His kid stands for steady progress, serving as the next era of leadership capable of advancing the grand plan without tearing down their hard-earned foundation. All throughout the 1920s, the company runs at absolute maximum output. The pedal bike sector remains incredibly rock-solid and highly lucrative. At the same time, the motorbike branch is absolutely booming. The tycoon managed to branch out, perfectly survive total financial ruin, and came out the other side as a true manufacturing powerhouse. He transitioned from being a penniless newcomer from Germany, patching up bikes in 1891, straight into one of the most influential producers in the United States by 1930. Every single project he laid his hands on blossomed into an absolute triumph. All the things he constructed stood the test of time. Every single guess he made proved to be incredibly accurate. He managed to stay alive while 300 competitors completely went under. Yet making it through tough times does not guarantee you will live forever. The upcoming challenge, the specific hurdle that will truly showcase his brilliance, is just around the corner. People call it the Great Depression, and it promises to be far more devastating than any disaster the country has faced before. Chapter 4, the massive pivot during the Depression years. Fast forward to October 1929. Wall Street completely collapses. The veteran businessman has to stand by as his own financial holdings vanish in the blink of an eye. Decades of stockpiled riches simply disappear. While he isn't totally broke, he certainly takes a massive hit. Worse still, he knows exactly what storm is brewing on the horizon. This is no minor market adjustment. We are not looking at a brief slump here. This signals the absolute start of a total financial meltdown. Sadly, the majority of corporate leaders are either completely oblivious or way too prideful to recognize the threat. Our protagonist catches on immediately. Once the summer of 1931 rolls around, joblessness is shooting through the roof. Financial institutions are folding left and right. Production lines are shutting their doors completely. The general public has completely stopped purchasing motorbikes. People out there are just scraping by to buy a loaf of bread. Meanwhile, Ignaz gathers his entire Excelsior motorcycle crew together. You've got the engineers, the bosses, and the floor workers all packed into one space. Their backlog of orders looks great. The market still wants what they're selling. Plenty of buyers are lined up and ready. Then Ignaz walks up to the front and delivers a message that completely stuns the room. Fellas, we are stopping today. He decides to pull the plug on the whole motorbike branch right then and there. Forget about a slow transition or finishing up batches. It is over. Chaos breaks out across the floor. The supervisors are completely blindsided. After all, they literally have pending sales sitting right in front of them. This is the number 3 motorbike maker in the whole country, trailing just behind Indian and Harley-Davidson. So why on earth would you kill a money-making department? Because Ignaz is playing the long game, looking 8 years into the future. He figures this Great Depression is going to drag on for the better part of 10 years, and he is dead on. Motorbikes are a splurge, purely optional purchases. When times get that tough, folks stop dropping cash on fun toys and focus on what they actually need. Bikes, however, offer a highly affordable way to get around. Your average blue-collar household definitely does not have the funds for an automobile, but scraping together the cash for a pedal bike is totally doable. Children still wanted to ride around. The local news delivery kids absolutely depend on them. Trying to keep both departments afloat during a massive economic crash would just bleed their funds dry, divide their attention, and probably bankrupt the whole company. Therefore, Ignaz makes a seriously tough call. He axes the lucrative motorbike side of things so that the crucial pedal bike operation can survive. Fast forward to September of 1931, and the Excelsior Henderson plant is completely closed up. The factory floor goes totally quiet, and all the employees are either moved elsewhere or laid off. Ignaz passes the torch to his 35-year-old son, Frank W. Schwinn, who grabs the reins of the bike department alongside a carefully chosen crew. Now, this is exactly where the story takes a fascinating turn. Frank refuses to just pump out the same tired old models. He gathers up all the engineering know-how they picked up from manufacturing motorbikes. He grabs that bold look, the flashy metal finishes, and that rugged vibe, injecting it straight into their pedal bikes. Come 1933, Schwinn rolls out the B10E motorbike. This pedal-powered machine is crafted specifically to mimic a real chopper, aimed right at youngsters and teens craving that speedy, edgy outlaw aesthetic. The curves are fierce, the body features a faux gas tank, and it practically screams horsepower. There is just one catch, though. The thing rides like a rock. Those skinny little wheels might be all right on freshly paved roads, but take them on bumpy streets and you will feel every single jolt right up into your jaw. That prompts Frank to hit up the American Rubber Company with a very particular demand. He asked them to design a balloon-style tread, skipping those standard 28 by 1.5-inch pencil-thin wheels the whole industry relies on. He is asking for 26 by 2.1, 5-inch fatties that offer a plush, forgiving ride. The guys at American Rubber figure he has completely lost his mind. Frank manages to talk them into it regardless. What comes next totally flips the script. Those thicker wheels glide right over the rough patches, soaking up the impact and keeping the rider comfy all day long. The youngsters are absolutely obsessed. Moms and dads are Thrilled, too, simply because their children are actually excited to spend time outside riding. By 1934, Frank tweaks the concept, further giving birth to the Aerocycle. We are talking a premium leather seat, shiny metal wheel guards, a flashy front lamp, and an honest-to-goodness honker. The final product is basically a shrunken-down chopper. It is an absolute beauty. It quickly transforms into the classic newsboy ride, a neighborhood cruiser that basically shapes what growing up in the States looks like for an entire era. All the rival brands immediately start ripping off the design. The Aerocycle effectively sets the gold standard for everyone else. However, Schwinn is not just banking on good looks. Frank goes ahead and sets up an entire department strictly for checking product standards, a move practically unheard of in the bike world back then. The man is fiercely dedicated to making sure every unit is flawless. They are eyeballing every single joint and putting every chassis through the ringer. If a piece falls short of their benchmark, it never even makes it out the door. To prove they mean business, they introduce the official Schwinn Seal of Quality. This becomes the very first formal seal of approval ever seen in the pedal bike manufacturing scene. It serves as a rock-solid promise, literally badged onto the metal, telling buyers it was put together perfectly. While the entire country's economy is crumbling, Schwinn is busy breaking new ground. As rival businesses start cheaping out just to keep the lights on, Schwinn actually pushes their benchmarks even higher. While countless other outfits are folding up shop, Schwinn is busy laying the groundwork to rule the market for years to come. Ignaz definitely made the smartest possible move. He traded away the flashy side of the company to rescue the core necessary part of it. The guy nailed the timeline of the economic crash with incredible accuracy. By pouring all their energy into pedal bikes, leveling up the looks, the durability, and the advertising, Schwinn actually comes out the other side of the Great Depression way more powerful than when it started. Once the Second World War rolls around, Schwinn is way beyond just keeping its head above water. The brand is absolutely crushing the competition. The massive company did not merely survive the rough patch. It transformed into an unstoppable force. Chapter 5. The Glorious Era After the War, 1946. The Second World War has officially wrapped up. The troops are returning to the States, tying the knot, snagging homes out in the newly built suburbs, and having kids. The massive spike in birth rates is just kicking off, and all those little ones are eventually going to want a set of wheels. Yet there is a massive hurdle Schwinn never saw coming: the European market. During 1946, the amount of foreign bikes shipped over multiplies by 10. 46,840 of these machines pour into U.S. harbors, and a solid 95% of those originate in the United Kingdom. These overseas models just hit different. They weigh a lot less, they can really move, and they rock 3 separate gears. When you put them side by side with the bulky domestic models, they ride like straight-up track stars. Grown-ups looking to break a sweat, go fast, or just ride something a bit more classy than a teenager's delivery bike. They are scooping up the English models. Schwinn reacts exactly how you would expect them to. They decide to craft a rival version, but make sure it still has that homegrown feel. Sure, the company rolls out lighter multi-speed models, yet they refuse to abandon those broad treads and oversized rims. That classic Schwinn trademark. This tactic holds the line decently enough, though it's hardly groundbreaking. The true game changer actually hits near 1950, completely unrelated to the two-wheelers entirely. It all comes down to getting the product out there. The vast majority of U.S. bike makers have been stuck in the exact same commercial rut for years. They simply offload massive shipments to retail giants such as Sears Montgomery Ward, as well as J.C. Penney. These big box chains basically paste their personal badges right onto the frames, pushing them as store exclusives. It is a completely effortless setup. The pipeline is deeply entrenched, demanding zero promotional hustle from the actual creators. However, when Frank Schwinn examines this arrangement, he spots a massive vulnerability. Handing over bulk inventory to a massive retailer means surrendering your grip on the reins. You totally forfeit the ability to dictate costs. Your company's unique character vanishes. A shopper strolls through the aisles at Sears and spots countless competing models lined up together. A handful bear the store's name, others rock the J.C. Penney logo, and perhaps a single unit flashes the Schwinn crest, assuming it is even on the floor. In that crowded space, how can Schwinn possibly pop? What is the path to earning die-hard fans? How can anyone defend charging top dollar while parked directly beside bargain basement knockoffs on that very same display? The brutal truth is they cannot. Because of this, Frank pulls the trigger on a drastic pivot. From now on, Schwinn is completely done supplying generic frames to the big retail chains. Moving forward, the only way a bike leaves the factory is sporting their official badge, shipped straight to standalone locally owned shops. The sole loophole involves Goodrich tire outlets, since those locations do not fit the typical big box mold. They operate as car parts centers that happen to have room for a few two-wheelers. This strategy represents a colossal risk. The major retailers boast incredible market penetration, massive order quantities, and immediate consumer access. By severing those ties, Schwinn literally turns its back on the most effortless revenue stream in the country. Yet taking the path of least resistance has never been Frank's goal. He craves absolute supremacy. By 1952, he puts together a fresh squad of executives to bring this vision to life. Ray Birch steps up to handle the advertising side. Bill Stowe slides into the general manager role. Meanwhile, Al Fritz takes the wheel for product development. This crew is far from a bunch of mindless head nodders. They are true heavy hitters who deeply grasp the mechanics of production, storefront sales, and consumer mindset. Then they start pounding the pavement, completely unironically. Company salesmen fan out to locally owned cycle boutiques nationwide with a solid proposition. Elevate Schwinn to your main showcase or ideally the only make you carry. As a trade-off, we grant you exclusive regional rights. You score direct backing from headquarters. Plus you wield the Schwinn banner, which happens to be the most respected title in the cycling game. The trade-off, you absolutely must fly the company flag. Zero generic badges, zero altered decals. You are peddling authentic Schwinn merchandise. Consequently, every single patron crossing your threshold will be fully aware of that fact. For the store owners, this is quite a bizarre offer to chew on. Going exclusive requires putting all your eggs in a single corporate basket. Should the manufacturer drop the ball, your business takes the hit. On the flip side, it completely eliminates cutthroat rivalry with the big box giant on the corner, who normally severely undercuts you by 20%. Instead, you are offering top-tier machines backed by a gold star pedigree. A massive wave of merchants signs the dotted line and the gamble pays off beautifully. Fast forward to the late 1950s, and the corporation has forged a coast-to-coast web of fiercely loyal shop owners who are financially motivated to champion their frames above all rivals. Whenever a mom or dad wanders inside seeking guidance, the clerk no longer rattles off 5 random choices. Instead, they steer the conversation straight to, "You are looking for a Schwinn, right?" The strategy is an absolute stroke of genius. The factory now dictates the narrative locks and the retail tags, and perfectly curates the buyer's journey. Concurrently, the Chicago headquarters is operating at max throttle. At the dawn of the 1970s, the facility boasts 1,800 employees working around the clock in 3 rotations, churning out upwards of 1 million units annually. The manufacturing zone functions as a beautifully orchestrated chaos of blazing metal joiners, coloring stations, and non-stop conveyor belts. Every single chassis gets meticulously fused by human hands. Each individual part undergoes a rigorous standalone check. Their dedication to flawlessness borders on paranoid simply because Frank realizes his whole empire hinges entirely on stellar public perception. Should a frame snap, a joint give way, or a buyer feel cheated, the entire house of cards tumbles, destroying the retailer's faith in the process. Shoppers will bounce to the competition. The company's legacy evaporates. Hence, maintaining top-tier craftsmanship remains an absolute mandate. Throughout a 20-year span, spanning from the late 1940s well into the dawn of the 1970s, this juggernaut consistently commands a minimum of 25% of the nation's cycle sales. A quarter of all two-wheelers purchased across the nation bear their insignia. That kind of dominance isn't just a lucky break. It is certainly no coincidence. It is the direct fallout of a logistical masterclass so incredibly potent that university marketing programs will dissect it for decades to come. They aren't the reigning champs merely due to superior engineering, even if their products are top tier. Their supreme reign stems directly from having an iron grip on the pipeline feeding the public. Furthermore, they engineered an ecosystem where every single player involved, from the factory floor to the showroom owner, all the way to the end user, reaps huge rewards by aligning with their brand. We are looking at their Renaissance era. This is the absolute summit. The dynasty is firing on all cylinders, giving off an aura of pure invincibility. Chapter 6. The Stingray Explosion. The dawn of the 1960s down in Southern California. Teenagers start pulling off wild stunts the factory brass never saw coming. They are grabbing run-of-the-mill frames and completely hacking them apart. Swapping in tiny 20-inch rims, slapping on those elongated banana saddles and torching on massive towering steering columns known as ape hangers. They even throw sky-high sissy bars on the rear. Essentially, these youths are morphing their rides into bite-sized choppers, perfectly mimicking the customized motorbikes their older siblings are wrenching together out in the driveway. It kicks off from the ground up, completely natural and gaining serious momentum. While traveling out west to California, Schwinn's R&D head Al Fritz hears rumors about this rising craze. He observes youngsters pulling the front wheels up, sprinting down the block, and flexing their personalized rides. It hits him right then and there. This is no passing phase. It is the upcoming megatrend. Racing straight back to Chicago, he throws the concept at the executive board, insisting they absolutely must manufacture this at scale. His vision was a bicycle rolling off the assembly line looking exactly like a modified motorcycle. The boardroom just chuckles, writing the whole concept off as absurd. They claim the design is bizarre and makes zero sense, swearing mothers and fathers would never purchase something giving off such strong outlaw vibes. Yet the designer refuses to back down. He pesters them until Frank Schwinn finally offers a highly reluctant go-ahead. Refusing to feature it in official brochures, they opt for a stealthy trial run directly through local shops to gauge interest. By 1963, the iconic Schwinn Stingray finally drops. Featuring a compact chassis, towering ape hanger, grips a long saddle, and a 20-inch back tire, the model debuts in brilliantly eye-catching shades. Buyers could choose vibrant, crimson flashy green, bright azure, or a glowing bronze finish. Visually, the streets had never seen anything like it. Youth everywhere completely lose their minds over the design. Pulling off cool stunts feels effortless on this rig, thanks to a condensed distance between the axles and heaviness. Toward the back, ripping the front tire off the pavement and cruising upright becomes a breeze. Since every youngster on the block is dying to flex, this particular bicycle becomes the ultimate status symbol, causing revenue to skyrocket overnight. From 1963 through 1968, the company moves almost 2 million units of the model. Yes, 2 million. The phenomenal run shatters all previous corporate records, crushing the numbers of their traditional cruisers and every previous release combined. Rather than merely being merchandise, it transforms into a societal legend. The whole experience practically writes the script for growing up in a 1960s neighborhood. Any standard United States youth raised in that era either possessed one of these beauties or prayed relentlessly for one. It becomes a staple in family carports, front yards, and vintage snapshots of children hanging out. Realizing they hit the jackpot, the brand immediately begins tinkering with new variations. Fast forward to 1965, and they roll out a speedy edition equipped with a completely smooth back wheel, borrowing directly from hot rod culture, where treadless rubber hugs the asphalt tight. The younger crowd eats it up due to its fierce, menacing, and ultra-quick aesthetic. By 1966, a legitimate gear selector is introduced slapped right onto the top tube, mimicking a classic Pontiac GTO. While it barely changes how the ride actually handles functional mechanics, totally missed the point. The entire appeal relies on the vibe, the swagger, and that fake sense of motor-driven torque. Once 1968 rolls around, the manufacturer dials the crazy to the maximum. They drop the crate lineup, representing the wildest, most ludicrous, heavily upgraded pedal pushers ever assembled. The initial trio features the orange crate, lemon peeler, and apple crate. Every single one boasts a citrus or orchard name while mimicking West Coast sprint cars. The intent was to build the absolute toughest two-wheeler in town, though grabbing one is far from inexpensive. Kicking off at $86.95 meant dropping a massive chunk of change back in 1968. To put things in perspective, a basic edition runs about $40, yet the top-tier version actually backs up that steep tag. Packed with heavy-duty front drum stoppers, reliable rear calipers or discs, a specialized elongated saddle, a 5-gear manual knob, and completely dipped in shiny metal. Function matches the flashy form perfectly here. Youngsters stash their chore cash, cut grass endlessly, and constantly plead with mom and dad to score one. Early runs see the brand pushing 150,000 of these premium setups annually. While not matching the base model volume, moving double-priced goods at that scale is mind-blowing. This high-end rig immediately morphs into the ultimate dream machine, serving as the grand step-up after maxing out a regular ride, drawing a firm line between hardcore cyclists and fakes. For 10 whole years, this specific craze completely commands the company's bottom line. Surpassing mere sales charts, it turns into an absolute powerhouse of pop culture that rival brands desperately attempt to clone. Huffy, Murray, and a dozen different builders hustle to drop knockoffs, yet zero of them manage to bottle that lightning. Being the pioneer allowed them to nail the execution and completely dominate the genre. However, the special lineup gets killed off by 1973. Motorhead hype slowly dies down. The younger generation finds new interests, while fads inevitably change, the legacy stays locked in. Both flagship models perfectly encapsulated an entire generation, raking in hundreds of millions of dollars while proving beyond a doubt that the brand knew youth desires far earlier than the competition. We are looking at the corporation in its glory days. The kingdom had truly reached its absolute zenith. It represents that flawless window where every single piece clicked together. Aesthetics, advertising, production, and shipping all harmonized beautifully. Tragically, things would never look this bright again. Moving into Chapter 7, they completely overlook the next massive shift during the 1970s. The whole country suddenly becomes manic about getting in shape. Running turns into America's favorite hobby as workout clubs open their doors left and right. Two-wheelers shake off their strictly juvenile reputation. Grown-ups suddenly demand them for breaking a sweat traveling to the office and enjoying their days off. An enormous untapped demographic emerges and expands rapidly. Sadly, the nimble rides these customers seek look nothing like the bulky iron horses the company has pumped out for ages. Riders are suddenly craving featherweight street cruisers, grabbing stylish European imports from brands like Raleigh and French makers featuring skinny rubber and curved handles. At the same time, carefully crafted Japanese options are hitting the shelves at unbeatable price points. You could lift one of these setups and it would literally be 50% lighter than your classic Schwinn model. Riders find them noticeably quicker, highly responsive, and perfect for genuine fitness and sport. So how does Schwinn react to this shift? By stubbornly churning out the exact same clunky steel frames they have relied on for generations. Sure, they slap on a few extra gears and play with the paint jobs, but at their core, they are manufacturing armored vehicles while consumers are begging for Ferraris. This marks the earliest red flag which the legacy brand brushes off entirely. While all this is going down, a completely different movement is brewing over on the West Coast in Southern California. Teenagers start hauling their Stingrays out to muddy fields for head-to-head sprints, launching off makeshift jumps and tearing through tight curves, completely trashing these cycles in a manner the original designers never intended. The action is gritty, entirely unsafe, and catching on like absolute wildfire. This is the dawn of bicycle motocross, or BMX. Fast forward to 1976, and Skip Hess launches Mongoose Bicycle Company with the sole purpose of fabricating gear for this fresh obsession. Gary Turner quickly follows suit, turning GT bicycles into a massive industry heavyweight. Make no mistake, these operations are far from producing child playthings. They are actively designing serious rides featuring beefed-up chassis, heavily textured rubber, and heavy-duty parts meant to withstand punishing drop-offs and crashes. The dirt track scene evolves into an officially recognized athletic pursuit, complete with structured tournaments, corporate backing, and a fiercely loyal fan base. The executives at Schwinn take one glance at the dirt ramps and view the whole thing as a massive lawsuit waiting to happen, way too reckless and far too underground. They assume angry moms and dads will immediately take them to court over injured children. Pushing extreme sports clashes horribly with the wholesome premium reputation the legendary bike maker spent half a century building. Because of this, they choose to stay entirely on the sidelines. They essentially hand over the keys to the kingdom, allowing Mongoose and GT to dominate the space. Then right around 1974, an innovator by the name of Gary Fisher pulls a stunt that really ought to have shaken the Chicago executives awake. He grabs an antique 1937 Schwinn Excelsior chassis, which happens to be one of the notoriously hefty, rugged beach-style rides from the brand's glory days, and decides to heavily customize it. The setup gets outfitted with a multi-speed drivetrain, aggressive dirt treads, and significantly upgraded stopping power. He then hauls this Frankenbike all the way up the peaks of Marin County, out in California, bombing down steep access roads at breakneck velocities. Without even realizing it, he has birthed the modern trail cycle. Excited by the potential, Fisher actually hauls his prototype straight to Schwinn, pitching the design guys on an entirely novel concept, taking bicycles off the pavement, tackling brutal landscapes, and creating an untouched sector of the industry. The corporate design team practically chuckles him right out of the building. They view the entire pitch as completely ridiculous. Who in their right mind would want to pedal through mud and rocks to them that defies the very purpose of a two-wheeler? Frank Fee Schwinn, the founder's grandson, who is currently calling the shots, flat out rejects the concept from top to bottom. In fact, he feels personally offended that hobbyists are hacking apart classic models for such a foolish pastime. He views it as a slap in the face to their historic legacy. Off in the distance, however, an up-and-coming businessman named Mike Sinyard is taking notes. By 1981, his outfit, Specialized, begins bringing in specialized trail parts straight from Japanese manufacturers. A year later, in 1982, Specialized drops the stump jumper onto the market, officially launching the first commercially manufactured off-road cycle. The launch is a massive overnight success. Before the decade is even halfway done, hitting the trails transforms from a weird underground hobby into a massive mainstream phenomenon. Local retailers are selling out of inventory faster than they can unpack it. Yet the top brass in Chicago continue to brush off the movement as a passing phase. Simultaneously, Trek Bicycle Corporation, which started up inside a rural Wisconsin barn back in 1976, is busy cornering the high-end street market for wealthy grown-ups. They set their sights on dedicated athletes who are more than happy to drop top dollar with entry-level rigs kicking off at $279. Trek has absolutely zero interest in battling over the kid demographic. Instead, they are carving out a highly profitable lane that the legacy brand blindly pretends isn't even real. Heading into 1980, the once untouchable corporation finds itself bleeding from several different wounds. Their flagship Chicago production facility, the exact same building they had been using since the early 1900s, is practically crumbling to the ground. The place is incredibly obsolete, painfully slow, and to be brutally honest, a major safety hazard. Entire sections of the floor are one spark away from burning down, and the machinery belongs in a museum. There is simply no way that old gear can weld the featherweight chassis modern riders actually want to buy. To make matters worse, the labor forces finally decide to walk off the job and hit the picket lines. Tensions between the executive suite and the guys on the assembly line were never exactly warm, but things have now boiled over into outright warfare. At this point, the founding family throws their hands up and calls it quits. They refuse to pump a single additional cent into the crumbling Illinois operation. Their big pivot is to construct a brand new facility down in Greenville, Mississippi, a region strictly governed by right-to-work laws where organized labor holds zero leverage. By 1981, the southern doors officially swing open. Executives bank on this move being the company's ultimate rescue mission, a state-of-the-art hub designed to crank out top-tier models and finally rival the overseas competitors. Well, that was the grand vision, at least. Switching gears back to 1982, the big bosses eventually make a clumsy push into the off-road craze by dropping a model called the Sidewinder. Calling it a trail rig is a massive stretch, though. In reality, they literally just grabbed their standard varsity or continental road setups and slapped some oversized rubber onto the rims. There is absolutely zero fresh design thinking involved, and it screams of a total disconnect from what trail junkies actually require out in the wild. The attempt comes off as incredibly lazy, and buyers instantly spot the cash grab for what it is. A full 12 months later, in 1983, the brand finally unveils the Sierra, a genuinely well-thought-out chromally-based dirt cycle that actually handles well. But there is a massive catch to this entire story. Every single unit is outsourced to Giant over in Taiwan. The legendary American brand isn't even welding their own gear anymore. And worse, they are showing up 10 years behind schedule to an industry already conquered by powerhouses like Specialized and Trek. By June of 1983, the iconic Chicago manufacturing hub was officially boarded up by Schwinn. 1,800 employees were suddenly out of a job while the very facility responsible for crafting the legendary Stingray, along with the Aerocycle and those classic two-wheelers that practically raised kids across the nation for decades, locked its doors permanently. As the final locally manufactured bicycle cleared the assembly floor, an entire chapter of history vanished right alongside it. They totally dropped the ball on the BMX craze, ignored the off-road mountain fad, and slept through the surge in featherweight racing frames, basically whiffing on every pivotal movement throughout the 1970s and early 1980s. On top of that, their primary production powerhouse was now completely gone. Their dominance was actively collapsing, yet the folks at the top were apparently too blind or too apathetic to notice. Chapter 8. Betting it all on Greenville. The year was 1980, and the Illinois operation was completely melting down as laborers walked out to fight for improved wages in a secure environment. Leadership examined the turmoil and merely fixated on a deteriorating 90-year-old brick-and-mortar structure. Between the archaic equipment blazing safety risks and crumbling foundation, the venue was literally incapable of fabricating the sleek models that consumers actually wanted to buy. Working with newer alloys meant using completely specialized fusing methods, incredibly precise measurements, and advanced gear that this aging facility simply lacked and had no room to install. At the same time, rival brands like Trek and Specialized were absolutely crushing them by rolling out top-tier street cycles and dirt crushers that the Midwestern site was entirely unequipped to build. Organized labor pressed hard for a financial upgrade, but the executive dynasty flatly rejected the idea, having already cemented their choice. The Windy City was dead to them. They were ready to push all their chips to the center of the table on a gigantic, risky pivot. Sometime in 1981, the corporation revealed its blueprint to erect a pristine production center down in Greenville, Mississippi. Here was the big strategy: construct a cutting-edge domestic plant fully capable of churning out high-caliber rides that could stand toe-to-toe with Trek's flawless craftsmanship. They would ship in the budget-friendly parts from the East, assemble the luxury versions in the Deep South, and proudly stick a domestic label on the frame, a classic double-pronged approach. This particular southern town was cherry-picked quite purposefully, largely because it sat in a right-to-work region where organized employee groups held zero leverage. Local government was tossing out sweet financial breaks, and the workforce was far less expensive than up north. In theory, creating an up-to-date, highly affordable, non-unionized space seemed like a stroke of genius. It was the ultimate industrial fantasy, perfectly retooled for the 1980s minus one massive oversight that slipped right past the executives. This municipality was basically off the map at the new compound, sitting 75 miles from any major freeway. Anybody traveling down from the company headquarters had to route through Memphis, hop onto a puddle jumper headed for a local airstrip, and then navigate 3 hours of winding, country lanes unless you skipped the final flight and simply cruised the entire distance straight through the deep country. The corporate brass actually began making cracks about how flying all the way to Taiwan was less of a hassle than reaching their own domestic hub. And honestly, they were pretty spot on. Yet transportation headaches were barely scratching the surface, as this tiny delta settlement was dominated by agriculture and aquaculture, lacking any real manufacturing backbone. Finding seasoned metallurgists or veteran pipe fusers locally was virtually impossible. The corporation was forced to teach its new hires from square one, but despite those efforts, the craftsmanship never quite mirrored the expertise of their original workforce. To make matters bleaker, getting parts to the floor was an absolute nightmare. Materials originating overseas had to hit docks on the Pacific side, get hauled cross-country by big rigs, and eventually wind their way deep into the southern backwoods, with each leg piling on extra expenses, endless wait times, and massive logistical headaches. The entire endeavor was essentially a losing battle against the fundamental laws of location and finance. When that fateful month of June 1983 arrived, the Midwestern facility was gutted. 88 years of legacy evaporated as 1,800 dedicated employees were laid off simultaneously. After the final Northern crafted two-wheeler received its label and went out the door, the entire weight of the brand was dumped directly onto the shoulders of the Southern plant. The company's survival, its master plans, and its ultimate destiny all hinged completely on this isolated facility operating flawlessly. Unsurprisingly, things went south. Between 1983 and 1991, the location proved to be a drawn-out disaster. The units rolling out the doors couldn't even beat the foreign alternatives, and frequently they were noticeably inferior due to wildly unpredictable construction standards. Even though the floor staff gave it their all, they simply lacked the multi-generational mastery of the old crew, not to mention the financial model was utterly unhinged. Sure, the payroll out south was a bargain compared to up north, but it was still costing the company $510, and occasionally 15 times more than what laborers were pulling in over in China and Taiwan. Forking over domestic salaries to build merchandise meant to rival the rock-bottom prices of Eastern goods was a surefire recipe for going broke. The numbers flat out didn't add up. In a desperate bid to right the ship, family descendant Richard Schwinn packed his bags and relocated south to take a hands-on management approach. By rolling out stricter inspection protocols, upgrading employee education, and streamlining the workflow, he managed to make a slight dent in the chaos. Sadly, it was essentially applying a bandage to a bullet wound. That southern hub failed to generate a single dime of positive revenue throughout its entire existence. Cash was bleeding out of the corporate accounts at an alarming rate as they forced around-the-clock rotations just to meet quotas and validate the massive expenditure. The financial reality was incredibly harsh, proving the location was merely a black hole instead of a moneymaker, a fact that became glaringly obvious by the close of the 1980s. The entire relocation was a colossal failure of epic financial proportions, leading straight to the inevitable corporate declaration in August of 1991. The Greenville plant is shutting its doors. 240 employees get their 60-day warnings. That vision has died. It is October 4th, 1991. An assembly line guy punches his time card after finishing the final bike. Just a standard unit. No grand farewell, zero fanfare, simply the 247th cycle of the shift. He powers down his gear, hits the switch, and secures the entrance. All the equipment inside goes totally quiet. None of it will ever fire up again. Following 96 straight years of building things stateside, Schwinn completely halts domestic bike production. The sole holdout is a small workshop up in Waterford, Wisconsin, manually crafting several hundred top-tier Paramounts annually for hardcore riders. However, their days of large-scale production are completely over. That facility down in Greenville is entirely vacant now. Zero staff, zero sound, zero output, merely a massive quiet structure out in the Mississippi countryside meant to rescue a dynasty yet ending up as its grave. See, this plant wasn't merely a manufacturing flop. It stood as glaring evidence that the brand failed to pivot, fight, or stay alive in the modern international market. Corporate risked everything on the belief that a domestic label carried enough weight to excuse the higher price tag. That was a huge miscalculation. Buyers simply ignored the country of origin. Folks only worried about how light, capable, cheap, and decked out the rides were. Trek offered stateside models absolutely, yet they simultaneously brought in Asian chassis to put together back home. Specialized completely ditched in-house building, morphing strictly into a creative and advertising powerhouse. Taiwan's Giant pumped out superior cycles at prices no U.S. shop could even touch. Meanwhile, Schwinn attempted to combat global shifts by leaning on fond memories. The guys in charge banked on national pride rather than pushing boundaries leading to their defeat. That quiet Mississippi plant remains a lasting tribute to their massive blunder. That spot marks exactly where their final shot faded away. The very location where a 96-year tradition of domestic craftsmanship finally collapsed. There wasn't any party or formal goodbye, simply an employee hitting the light switch and securing the deadbolt on his way out. Permanently. Chapter 9. The Ultimate Downfall. 1983. The brand ultimately jumps into the dirt track scene by dropping the Predator, an authentic chromally setup engineered for hardcore competitors. Honestly, the product rocks solidly designed, tough as nails, and affordable, yet it shows up way too late to the game. Mongoose practically ruled the sport since 1975. Brands like Diamondback GT and Harrow had completely run the show for ages, making this entry incredibly delayed. Those youngsters who live for dirt jumps have become high schoolers interested in entirely new hobbies. While the new model moves some units, it remains a blip rather than a game changer. 12 months pass, and in 1984, they debut the High Sierra Trail Cruiser. Surprisingly, this effort totally succeeds. You get an authentic all-terrain machine featuring appropriate angles and premium parts strictly meant for hitting the trails. Revenue skyrockets, multiplying by 2 annually for 3 straight cycles. At last, the crew lands a massive win in a contemporary space, though there's a huge catch. Management remains stuck behind the 8-ball, bleeding whatever cash they make just to keep that Mississippi plant breathing. Concurrently, Al Fritz, the exact same visionary behind the 1963 Stingray, spends his time developing an entirely separate project altogether. He invents the Airdyna stationary workout rig utilizing a massive propeller rather than your standard heavy wheel. Push the cranks with more force, and the machine pushes back equally hard. The concept is absolutely brilliant and drops right in the middle of the 1980s workout boom. By 1986, they moved 67,000 Airdynes at $595 a pop. We are talking almost $40 million rolling in from just one item, boasting incredibly fat profit margins. Just for a fleeting second, this stationary trainer single-handedly stops the whole corporation from going under, pulling in massive cash while the traditional cycle sector flounders. Yet that lifeline snaps quickly too. Heading into the early 1990s, Sears rolls out a copycat version for way less cash. The original brand sees business plummet 35% practically in a flash. $8 million in pure earnings vanished in a heartbeat. Check out their actual cycle volume now, since this exposes the absolute rock bottom. Back in 1987, the guys pushed 1 million rigs. Come 1991, those figures get sliced right down the middle to 500,000. Hitting 1993, they tanked to 275,000. Over a 6-year stretch, the company shed 73% of their total sales. We aren't talking a minor slump. They are totally nosediving. Plus, this is where things get genuinely terrifying. Around 1988, Taiwan's Giant ends up manufacturing 82% of their entire lineup. We're looking at about 700,000 units. The legendary American brand essentially handed their whole manufacturing operation over to one overseas partner. They rely entirely on that Asian partner for all their stock, and the supplier is fully aware. That kind of power is huge, and it's getting weaponized against the Home Office soon. Steering the ship straight through this storm is Edward Schwinn Jr. Eddie represents the fourth tier of the founding bloodline. Everyone basically agrees Eddie is a genuinely sweet dude, yet he lacks the fire of his great-grandfather Ignaz or the grit of his grandpa Frank. The guy simply lacks the relentless drive, the foresight, and the strict management skills that constructed the dynasty in the first place. Yoshi Shimano, an interpreter from Japan, collaborating with the team around then, afterward remarked that Eddie had a good heart. Yet the actual day-to-day grind barely held his attention. Edward was always a deal-maker at heart, completely uninterested in running the shop floor. He spent his time hunting down buyouts, fresh alliances, and unexplored markets, doing whatever he could to avoid repairing the fundamental issues at home. Even more damaging, he was pushing away the exact talent needed to keep the lights on and the gears turning. A massive wave of seasoned leadership got the boot, or simply walked away, because of him veterans who knew the ins and outs of production supply chains in the cycling world. While a few were formally sacked, plenty of others threw up their hands and left on their own, and their next destination right into the arms of rival brands, with Trek snatching up a good chunk of them. Specialized grabbed the rest. These defectors packed up decades of invaluable corporate secrets and practically gift-wrapped them for the opposition. At the same time, the dynamic with their overseas builders was completely falling apart. Giant and China bicycles had evolved way beyond just assembling frames. They held the purse strings now. Schwinn was buried under a mountain of debt for inventory that had already crossed the ocean. On top of that, since Giant started pushing its own product line, they were simultaneously building Schwinn's gear and fighting them for retail space. As the 1980s came to a close, things had reached a breaking point. Storage facilities were absolutely stuffed with products that wouldn't move. Thousands of undesirable models just collected dust in their packaging, losing value by the second. Writing checks to their overseas partners became impossible. Consequently, their Eastern manufacturers started requiring payment up front before handing over any goods. The days of flexible financing were dead. It was either fork over the money immediately or the assembly lines halted entirely. Naturally, Wall Street caught on. Lenders looked at the tanking revenue, the ballooning liabilities, and the stockpiled warehouses, prompting them to instantly slam the brakes on any new loans. The brand could no longer rely on borrowed funds to stay afloat. The trap was finally shutting, and by 1992, the balance sheets looked apocalyptic. Their slice of the industry had plummeted from 25% down to a measly 5%. They were sitting on $82 million in liabilities. Over the prior 3 years, they had bled $50 million. In 1992 specifically, they burned through $25 million. That breaks down to over $2 million vanishing every 4 weeks. They were hemorrhaging more than $1 million every single month with absolutely zero hope of a turnaround. Vendors completely flatlined any shipments unless the company fronted the cash before the boats even left the dock. Bike shops started panicking quickly, pivoting to stable heavyweights like Trek Specialized and Giant just to keep their shelves stocked. The whole operation was coming apart at the seams. On August 26, 1992, Chief Operating Officer Ralph Day Murray stepped into the boardroom to drop the ultimate bombshell, a truth they all suspected but dreaded acknowledging. Nobody was riding to the rescue. There wouldn't be a billionaire backer, a massive bailout package, or a sudden stroke of luck at the 11th hour. The run was dead. 6 weeks after that meeting on October 7, 1992, the corporation officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, ending 97 years as an independent family business. The very same enterprise that weathered the spectacular cycling crash of 1900, the Great Depression. A pair of global conflicts and endless marketplace rivals was finally broke, leaving the founders' descendants with absolutely zero power. Yet the actual restructuring process turned into an absolute circus in the courtroom. On paper, the founders' estate still held the rights to the actual brand moniker, and they demanded a massive payout for its use. This created a massive tug-of-war between lenders and the heirs over priority payouts, while attorneys bickered endlessly about the actual worth of a totally ruined legacy. Their Asian manufacturing partners held some of the biggest debts, and they were in no mood to play nice. They demanded their cash back immediately, fully prepared to chop the dying corporation into pieces to recoup their losses. The legendary titan of American cycling was getting completely stripped for parts right in front of a judge. Assembly lines shut down, employees were let go, retail partnerships evaporated, and every last piece of stock was sold off for pennies. A brand identity that used to carry a multi-million-dollar valuation was reduced to a simple line item ready to be hawked to whoever wrote the biggest check. This marked the absolute bottom. The dynasty had fallen. Ignaz had arrived in the States completely broke back in 1891, only to forge an absolute powerhouse. Fast forward 3 generations, and his great-grandson, Edward II, stood by as the entire thing crumbled to dust. It wasn't a streak of terrible misfortune or completely unpredictable market shifts that killed them, but rather a long string of squandered chances, horrible game plans, incredibly weak management, and a stubborn refusal to evolve with the times. The brand wasn't taken down by superior engineering. They were destroyed by smarter executives at rival firms who predicted where the industry was heading and sprinted in that direction. All while this legacy brand desperately held on to yesteryear. Chapter 10, The Quiet Plant Tells All, Greenville, Mississippi. If you cruise down Route 82 right now and take a left onto that forgotten commercial drag, you'll spot it. The old manufacturing hub, or at least the ruins of it. The structure hasn't collapsed yet, but it's completely hollowed out, deserted, and eerily quiet. Overgrowth pushes up through the shattered asphalt outside. Smashed glass is everywhere. The front logo is completely washed out, and the real estate sign out front has been baking in the sun for so long it's basically amber. This facility was literally meant to be their salvation. It was the ultimate Hail Mary pass, a testing ground to show the world that domestic production could still go toe-to-toe with overseas giants. Rather than a beacon of hope, it essentially became their graveyard. The assembly floor hasn't made a peep since 1991, marking more than 30 years of total inactivity. Zero equipment, humming, no shifts, punching the clock, absolutely nothing. Shipping out the back doors, just dead air and rotting steel. It stands as the ultimate metaphor for the death of domestic bike building. Tune into that quiet emptiness. In 3 crucial takeaways emerge principles any startup or massive corporation must grasp. Point number 1, evolve or prepare to go under. The boardroom viewed the dirt bike craze as a passing trend. When rugged trail riding emerged, they practically laughed it off. Back in 1974, they witnessed Gary Fisher bombing down hills on a customized vintage frame, yet they completely dismissed his vision. While they snoozed, Skip Hess built Mongoose into a dirt track powerhouse. At the same time, Mike Sinyard rolled out Specialized to absolutely crush the off-road sector. Trek zeroed in on featherweight street frames, sweeping up the grown-up demographic. None of these guys just caught a lucky break. These founders were simply keeping their ears to the ground, giving riders exactly what they craved. The legacy brand possessed all the household name power. The retail pipelines were already theirs. The production know-how was locked down. Had they just acted swiftly and respected these new trends, they would have easily cornered every single market, except they stood still. Management figured their legendary badge was a golden ticket. They operated under the delusion that folks would mindlessly purchase their products out of sheer habit, a miscalculation of epic proportions. A stellar track record might grant you a buffer, but it will never grant you immortality. The second you stop pushing boundaries, your expiration date is set. Your corporate size is utterly irrelevant. Decades of ruling the roost mean absolutely nothing. Consumers feel zero loyalty to your historical achievements. Buyers only care about the value you bring to the table today. The iconic bicycle maker lost sight of that reality, sealing their own doom. Takeaway 2: yesterday's playbook won't secure tomorrow's success. Building that Mississippi facility was basically an effort to rewind the clock. Leadership desperately wished to recapture a golden era, a period when domestic manufacturing carried serious weight, back when stellar build quality commanded top dollar, and merely slapping their logo on a frame guaranteed sales. However, the global landscape had completely shifted. Come the 1980s, supply chains were spanning the planet. Factories across Asia were churning out incredibly well-made two-wheelers for mere pennies on the dollar. Overseas rivals were welding superior chassis much cheaper than anyone down south ever could, and the buying public was well aware of this reality. Producing goods stateside ceased being a massive selling point. Instead, it became a crippling financial anchor. The company burned through massive piles of cash attempting to force the issue. Ultimately, they only demonstrated that longing for the good old days makes for awful corporate policy. Trek, however, totally got it. They kept some production local while sourcing other models from abroad, brilliantly playing both sides of the field. Specialized outsourced, literally everything pivoting into a pure engineering and promotional powerhouse. Meanwhile, Giant evolved from a simple supplier into an absolute standalone titan. Every single rival pivoted. The old guards stubbornly dug their heels in. They held on tightly to an outdated self-image, completely ignoring the evolution required to survive. And that empty southern plant now serves as a quiet tombstone to their arrogance. The third takeaway: strong leadership trumps historical clout any day. The founding patriarch was brilliant, dodging the 1900 industry crash by scooping up failing rivals. He steered the ship right through the worst economic downturn by ruthlessly axing a money-making motorbike arm to double down on pedal power. That man possessed incredible foresight, strict focus, and the sheer nerve to execute cutthroat moves. Then came his heir, Frank, who proved equally razor-smart. He built the very franchise system that had a stranglehold on domestic sales for generations. That leader rolled out their most famous cruiser, shattering all previous sales records. He thoroughly comprehended how to invent and deliver. Then came the grandson, Ed, who completely lacked that fire. Everyone says he was a nice enough guy, but simply being polite won't keep a massive corporation afloat. He genuinely couldn't care less about the actual bikes. Playing the corporate boardroom game held way more appeal to him than running the shop floor. He actively pushed out or terminated the exact brain trust keeping the lights on. Those bright minds marched directly over to the competition, taking decades of institutional knowledge with them. Handing down the crown rarely ensures you're getting a qualified executive. Genetics simply cannot pass along business acumen. The moment you hand the keys to somebody totally unqualified, the entire castle crumbles to the ground, regardless of how solid the bedrock is. The iconic brand found this out through sheer devastation. So what went down after the final curtain call? Come January 1993, financier Sam Zell and his investment group snagged the dying entity out of Chapter 11 for $40 million. He attempted a rescue mission, yet the rot was terminal. By 2001, the battered corporation threw in the towel and went belly up yet again. A holding group scooped them up next before getting swallowed by a Canadian conglomerate, ultimately offloading the remnants to a massive Dutch enterprise. These days, the frames roll off overseas assembly lines destined for the aisles of massive discount chains. Sure, the trademark is technically alive. You could grab one at a local supercenter, but the heartbeat is entirely dead. It's nothing more than a sticker slapped onto cheap generic rides that share absolutely zero DNA with the empire started back in 1895. The sole surviving link between the current badge and its legendary history rests with a descendant who genuinely fought to rescue the southern plant. Back in 1993, he launched his own bespoke workshop up in Wisconsin. That small shop pieces together a couple hundred absurdly high-end artisan frames annually. It's the exact caliber of craftsmanship the original outfit championed back when excellence eclipsed mass production. While it's a gorgeous homage, it remains a tiny specialized gig. It's certainly no corporate juggernaut. That quieted plant tells a story all its own. Just take a walk past those empty Mississippi walls right now. Take a glance at those shattered glass panes, the weed-choked grounds, and those corroded iron doors. We are looking at far more than merely the tale of Schwinn. We are witnessing the final chapter of a monumental age in United States industry. Here lies the inevitable consequence of a corporation completely turning a deaf ear to the people buying their products. It occurs the moment executives believe their classic winning formulas are bulletproof against time. It happens the second blind ego wins out over practical business sense. It takes place when sweet memories blur the harsh reality of the market. These quiet, empty walls stand for something much bigger than the downfall of a single bicycle maker. They serve as a grim symbol for any corporation that convinced itself it was absolutely invincible. They mirror every commercial kingdom that trusted a famous logo to shield them from disaster. They echo the fate of every single enterprise that completely ignored tomorrow while throwing a party for yesterday's achievements. The pioneer arrived in the United States completely flat broke, yet he managed to construct the absolute biggest bike-making juggernaut on Earth. Fast forward 3 eras, and his descendant could only stand by as the whole thing crumbled into total financial ruin. The legacy was chopped up and auctioned off just to satisfy the debt collectors. 97 years is all it took to go from a penniless newcomer to a manufacturing god straight down into a lifeless business husk. Right now, the production plant down in Greenville, Mississippi rests in total quiet, completely vacant and left behind by time. It stands as a towering headstone dedicated to massive drive, unchecked ego, and the absolutely ruthless reality of the free market. Every piece of equipment has vanished. The massive workforce has completely disappeared. The grand vision vanished right along with them. Nothing remains behind these walls except absolute stillness. Yet if you pay careful attention, that dead air is actually shouting a desperate message to any executive currently calling the shots. Evolve with the times or prepare to perish. Push the envelope or fade into nothingness. Wall Street and Main Street buyers alike give exactly zero thought to your historical milestones. The only thing that truly matters is the value you deliver right now. The folks running this brand completely lost sight of that fact. As a result, the very battleground where they attempted their final comeback remains pitched in blackness and totally deserted. It functions as a massive grave marker for a dynasty that flatly denied the need to evolve. Step inside the utterly quiet remnants of this once great facility. This is the exact place where the ultimate two-wheeled fantasy of the nation sparked to life, conquered the globe, and finally devoured itself.